In the jungle of Borneo, a small Canadian company said it had found the richest gold deposit on Earth. Not a few 100,000 ounces, 70 million, and its own geologists whispered the number might reach 200 million. It was a penny stock, a company that had traded for pocket change, run out of a basement in Calgary. Within 3 years, it was worth more than $6 billion. Teachers put their pensions into it. A dictator demanded a cut. Two of the biggest gold miners on the planet fought to partner with it. There was just one problem with the greatest gold strike of the century. There was no gold. Not a little, not less than they hoped. None, not a single economic ounce in the ground. The deposit had been built by hand, sample bag by sample bag, with gold panned from a local river and shavings filed off jewelry. And the one man who knew exactly how it was done boarded a helicopter over the jungle and fell out of the sky. So here is the forensic question. How do you fake the biggest gold deposit in history and fool an entire industry for years? This is the story of a $6 billion fraud built from river mud and a saltshaker. And the law it left behind that protects your money right now. To understand the biggest mining fraud ever, you have to start with a man who had almost nothing. His name was David Walsh, a stockbroker turned promoter in Calgary, Alberta. By the late 1980s, he was deep in debt, running his little exploration company out of the basement of his home. The company was called Bre-X Minerals. On the Alberta Exchange, it was worth almost nothing. Walsh was chasing the oldest dream in mining. One strike, one discovery big enough to change everything. And in 1993, he bet what little he had on a patch of jungle on the far side of the world. A property called Buseng, deep in the rainforest of Kalimantan, the Indonesian half of Borneo. Others had drilled there before. They had found almost nothing and walked away. But Walsh had hired a geologist who saw it differently, a Filipino named Michael de Guzman. De Guzman was brilliant, charming, and certain. He later said the location of the gold had come to him in a dream. Alongside him was a veteran exploration chief named John Felderhoff, who had found real gold before in the jungles of the Pacific. And in 1995, the drill cores they pulled out of Buseng began to come back glittering. Here is how gold exploration is supposed to work. You drill deep into the rock and pull up a long cylinder of stone, a core. You crush a piece of that core, send it to a lab, and the lab tells you how much gold is hiding inside. Do that across hundreds of holes and you can map a deposit nobody can see. The entire industry runs on one thing: trust in the sample. And Bre-X's samples were astonishing. The first estimate was around 2 million ounces of gold, already enough to make the company worth real money. Then the number grew. In 1995, 30 million ounces. In 1996, 60 million. By 1997, the official figure was 70 million ounces, the richest gold discovery anyone had ever reported. And Felderhoff, the exploration chief, told reporters it might ultimately reach 200 million. 200 million ounces would have been the largest gold deposit in the history of the planet. The mining world went into a frenzy. Analysts flew to the jungle. The story was simply too big and too beautiful to question. And almost nobody asked the one question that mattered. If others drilled this exact ground and found nothing, why is Bre-X finding the richest gold on Earth? The answer was sitting in a row of canvas bags at a remote jungle camp. And it had nothing to do with geology, because there was no gold in the rock of Buseng. The gold was being added by hand after the drill came up. Miners have a word for it: salting, sprinkling gold into a worthless sample so it tests rich. It is the oldest trick in prospecting. What made Bre-X unique was the scale and the patience. For roughly 2.5 years, someone at that camp salted thousands of samples, one bag at a time. At first, they used gold panned from a local river, bought quietly from villagers. Investigators later estimated around $61,000 of it. Later, the gold in one part of the deposit was something even stranger. It had been filed off jewelry. Now, why did nobody catch it? 2 reasons, and both are the whole trick. First, the cores were crushed before testing. Once you grind the rock to powder, you cannot prove where the gold really sat. Second, and this is the masterstroke, Bre-X never let anyone keep a twin sample and never let anyone re-drill the same hole. The entire fraud rested on one silent bet: that nobody would ever put a drill back into the exact same spot. Think about what that means. A gold mine you are not allowed to check is not a discovery. It is a promise, and a promise is not gold. It is like a student who shreds every exam after grading himself, and then asks the world to trust his perfect record. For years, the world trusted it, because the only thing growing faster than the gold estimate was the share price. In April 1996, Bre-X moved up to the Toronto Stock Exchange. The stock that had once traded for pennies climbed past $250 a share. A company run from a basement was now worth more than $6 billion. And this was not just gamblers, this was the careful money. Public pension funds bought in. The savings of teachers, of municipal workers, of ordinary Canadians poured into Busang. The Ontario Teachers Fund, the Quebec Public Pension, retirement money betting on a hole in the jungle nobody could inspect. But a prize that big in a country like that never stays yours alone, because the gold sat under Indonesia. And Indonesia in 1996 belonged to one man, President Suharto. Suharto had ruled for 3 decades, and no mine would open without his family taking a piece. First, his daughter's circle was steered toward a deal with the mining giant Barrick Gold. Then the arrangement was torn up, and Bre-X hired the dictator's son instead. Finally, a winner emerged, the American mining company Freeport-McMoRan. On February 17, 1997, the deal was announced. Bre-X would keep 45%. Freeport would actually run the mine. For Walsh and his geologists, it looked like the finish line. The richest gold on Earth, blessed by a dictator, partnered with a global giant. But they had just made the one mistake the entire fraud could not survive. Because Freeport did not buy the story. Freeport was going to bring its own drills and bore its own holes right next to theirs. This was the thing Bre-X had spent 2.5 years making sure never happened. An independent driller, putting fresh holes into the exact same ground and crushing nobody's samples but its own. Freeport drilled twin holes, only meters from Bre-X's richest results, and the rock came back the way it always should have. Barren, insignificant traces of gold, nothing remotely like a mine. By around the 10th of March, 1997, Freeport knew. The richest deposit on Earth was a fantasy. Quietly, they asked Bre-X for an explanation. And they asked the man who ran the drilling to come to the site in person. That man was Michael de Guzman. On March 19, 1997, he boarded a helicopter to fly into the jungle and face Freeport's team. About 20 minutes into the flight, a door opened, and de Guzman fell from the sky into the rainforest below. Handwritten suicide notes were found. 4 days later, a body was recovered in the jungle, badly decomposed. The official ruling was suicide, a man who could not face what was coming. But the identification was disputed, and to this day, it remains one of the great unsolved deaths in the history of mining. Whatever the truth, the effect was the same. The one man who knew exactly how the gold got into those bags was gone, and the fraud he left behind was about to meet the public. On March 26, 1997, Freeport went public with what its drills had found. Insignificant amounts of gold, the blunt language of mining for, "There is nothing here." The market did not wait for proof. In 2 trading days, Bre-X lost about 85% of its value. Around $3 billion vanished from the screens before anyone had even confirmed the fraud. Bre-X still insisted the gold was real, so an independent firm was brought in to settle it for good. Strathcona Mineral Services. Their job was simple: drill the holes, test the rock, and report the truth. On May 4, 1997, Strathcona delivered its verdict. The samples had been falsified, the gold had been added. In one part, it had been shaved off jewelry. Their words became famous. A fraud, they said, without precedent in the history of mining. There was no economic gold deposit at Busang. There never had been. On May 7th, the stock that had touched $250 traded for 6 cents. 2 days later, Bre-X filed for bankruptcy. More than $6 billion. Gone, not lost in a bad market. It had simply never existed. The Ontario Teachers Fund lost around $100 million. Quebec's pension, around 70. Municipal workers in Ontario around 45, and tens of thousands of small investors who had simply believed the richest gold story of their lifetime were left with nothing. So who answered for the biggest mining fraud in history? Michael de Guzman, the man at the center of the drilling, was already dead in the jungle. David Walsh, the founder, moved to the Bahamas as the scandal broke. In June 1998, just over a year after the collapse, Walsh died of a brain aneurysm. He was 52. That left John Felderhoff, the exploration chief who had sold tens of millions of dollars of his own stock at the very top. He had cashed out roughly $84 million in 1996, while the gold story was still climbing. Canada's National Police investigated for years, and in 1999 closed the case with no criminal charges. Ontario's securities regulator did charge Felderhoff with insider trading. The trial dragged on for the better part of a decade, and in 2007, a judge acquitted him on every count. Nobody, in the end, was convicted of anything for the Bre-X fraud. $6 billion conjured out of river mud and filed jewelry, and not one person went to prison. If you have followed this channel, you have heard that ending before. Enron sent its men to jail. The crash of 2008 did not. Bre-X is the purest version of the pattern, the biggest fraud and the emptiest courtroom. Now go back to the question we started with. How do you fake the biggest gold deposit in history? The forensic answer is almost insulting in its simplicity. You do not need gold. You need samples that nobody is allowed to check, crushed before anyone can question them, from holes nobody is allowed to drill again. Bre-X did not break the rules of mining disclosure. It exposed that there barely were any. And just like the great frauds before it, Bre-X left a ghost behind, a law written in its own blood. On the 1st of February, 2001, Canada brought in National Instrument 43-101. From then on, every mining company on a Canadian exchange had to have a qualified person, a named, accountable expert who signs for the results. Samples now travel under a chain of custody, from the drill to the lab, so nobody can quietly salt a bag in the jungle. The exact blind trust that Bre-X fed on is the one thing the modern rules refuse to give. Today, that standard is copied around the world. If you have ever owned a mining stock, you are protected by a rule the dead of Bre-X paid for. The richest gold deposit on Earth turned out to be a man with a saltshaker, a river, and a story too good to question. 70 million ounces, $6 billion, zero gold. And it leaves one permanent lesson for anyone who has ever sold a sure thing. A discovery nobody is allowed to verify is not a discovery. It is a promise, and a promise has never once turned into gold.